Bert, I swear to fucking God,
I
man.
swear to fucking God, Bert.
Hey, welcome back to Movies Good, Internet Bad. Severance has its sixth episode of its second season in the bag now, and I was uncomfortable the whole time. And we're going to talk through it and try to make some sense of all of this. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Shane, I don't care how you're doing today. I just need help getting through this. So
Oh
let's get
God,
started.
there. This was probably the most dramatic episode that we've gotten so far. We've had
Yes.
so many things happen, but this one was. It really ramped up the tension and the creepiness a whole
Yeah.
lot more than we've seen this season. I mean, we had the dramatic moments in the Woes Hollow episode, but this is where it gets sinister. I feel
Yeah,
like,
for sure. And
and
it
I
it
loved it.
ramped up the tension by slowing down, which I thought was
Yeah,
really
yeah,
interesting. The whole
yeah.
season
It's
so
true.
far has been at like breakneck speed, and this
Yep.
one was like, nope, we're pumping the brakes and we're gonna make you stew in everything. So
Yeah.
let's break it down beat by beat.
Let's do it. So we start with Mark and Ragabi. They are talking about Gemma, and Ragabi lets on a interesting note that Gemma is essential to the
Mhm.
company, which we always kind of knew that Gemma, there's something going on with her, Miss Casey, in the company. But this is, I think, Ragabi knows a little bit more than we do, the audience. So this
Yep.
is an interesting point. But then Adam Scott gives a nicely acted moment where Mark talks about the bargaining phase of grief
Yep.
and how you would do anything to change what happened. And I thought this was a highlight for him acting wise. He really
Yep.
broke down, and we haven't seen that from Adam Scott very much in his career. So this is great stuff.
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of when Bryan Cranston was Walter White in Breaking Bad. Because everybody
Yeah,
knew him from Malcolm in the Middle, and he
yeah,
was the goofy
that's a
dad, right? And
mhm.
or Robin Williams in 1 Hour Photo. Comedic actors understand grief and sadness and depression probably on a higher level than most people. So they just don't ever always let it out. But
Yeah,
here's
yeah,
Adam Scott in front of the camera and Ben Stiller behind it, just tearing our
yep,
hearts out. So
yeah. But I thought this was great.
okay,
But then we cut
really
to
good.
Dylan, who's explaining the note that Irving left behind with the exports hall drawing,
Yep.
and Mark opens the refrigerator and starts to reintegrate, flashing
Mhm.
back and forth, and then we get the credit sequence, of course. But then we get this nice little sequence where we start with Milchek, who's clearly like unhinged about his performance review. He is
Poor guy.
in deep trauma about his
Yeah.
performance review, but he calls Miss Huang into his office and talks to her. But we get some more information about Miss Huang here very efficiently, that she's essentially like on a fellowship, like an internship.
Yep.
And he mentions that she wants to become wintertide material,
Yep.
which I made the connection pretty immediately when I wrote it down, that winter tide is similar to cold harbor, right? Like
Hmm. Yep.
cold and then a body of water or something water related. So
Yep.
I found that pretty interesting. And there's a lot of references like that. Like all their name tags are the pins or water droplets.
Hmm.
So something
Yep.
to do with that. A
Yeah,
lot of water references.
for sure.
But anyways, Milchik starts going through the paper clips because he is like losing his mind. And then we get to this nice little sequence where Mark tells Helly about the sex. He uses the term shared vessels,
Shared vessels. And he
which
tells
is
her this in a
now,
bathroom stall, which is just like
yes,
the best place to confess anything to anyone. So,
I am only going to refer to sex as shared vessels from now on. But Helly is very upset about this because she didn't get to do it herself, right?
of
Like
course.
it's another thing that Helena has taken from her,
Mhm.
her independence, her freedom, yeah, all of
Yep.
this, and now like her love, right? So
Yep.
she clearly hates Helena and wants to stick it to the man, and that she does. But we get this nice sequence that I refer to as everyone has sex. So Dylan is meeting with his Audi's wife in their I forget what the room is called, and they start hooking up.
Yeah.
Which we all saw this coming, right?
Of
Like
course.
this was
Yeah.
the obvious direction for this plot line to go in, that the wife would fall in love with the innie Dylan because he's much cooler and more put together, and the
Yep.
Audi Dylan would kind of fall by the wayside. But a really interesting dynamic. But at the same time, Helly and Mark also have sex.
Yep.
They pitch a tent, which is
Indeed,
also a
they do.
euphemism.
Yep.
Pitch
And
a pants tent.
where has that room been this whole time with just
I think
covered up
they've
computer
passed it a
monitors and
couple
whatnot.
times, maybe.
But like, what happened in there
I
before
don't
that they had
know.
to
I don't
cover it
know.
with tarps? But
Yeah. But I'm glad it's there. We got a nice little scene.
the work
Uh,
was mysterious and important in that
yes,
movie.
it was
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
mysterious and important. But at the same time, Milchik is having his breakdown.
Mhm.
He is paper clipping so many things that his hands just start shaking. He's clearly like having an episode. And then he goes to his mirror and he deprograms himself because the feedback was that he used too many big words.
Yep.
So he takes phrases that he used, which is abandon your childish folly,
Hmm.
and condenses it down into grow up,
Grow up.
basically.
Yep.
Which I thought this was really unique and interesting, like from a writing perspective. That
Hmm.
like usually writers try to do the opposite,
The
right? Where
opposite.
they take something super simple and they're like, I gotta find a thesaurus and make this sound interesting,
Yeah.
and it's doing the exact opposite thing, right?
Yeah. And then at the end of it, he even stops saying the word up and he's just shouting
Yeah,
the word grow, which I
grow.
thought was interesting because what is every company in the corporate world after?
Yeah,
Growth every
yep,
year, right? It's
yep.
always about grow, 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 grow. And he's just like screaming that into the mirror
I
and
didn't even catch
incredibly
that.
acted.
That's a really great observation. Yeah,
There's
growth.
something in every episode of this show that is
Yes,
commentary on the workplace or corporate life or whatever. And that was this
yeah,
week's.
you're doing a much better job of getting that out of the show than I am. You're catching a lot more of those than I am, which
I must be more
I'm thankful
jaded than you
for.
are.
But yeah, so we then finished this scene. It was just a nice little crosscut between everyone and good
Yeah.
music playing in the background, kind of creepy. But then we get Mark starts bleeding, and so
Hmm.
he goes to Miss Huang, who's also playing the nurse in this case, and he again starts reintegrating, and we cut back to the Ragabi scene,
Hmm.
and Ragabi mentions, "I'm gonna flood the chip to make it go faster," and he's
Yep.
like, I'm over this. Like, I'm hungry. I'm out," and he storms out.
Yeah.
Uh, so
They
then
give
we,
the important piece of dialogue in there though, where she says you're having recent cross memories, which explains
yeah,
why
that
it
right,
feels like it's happening at the same time, but they just confirmed in the episode that none of that is happening at the same time, which makes sense
correct.
because the body can't be in two places at once. That
Yeah,
shores a lot of that up. So
yeah. We've had a couple comments on the prior videos when we've said something like, in the Woes Hollow episode where I said like Mark starts reintegrating. They're like, well, he can't be reintegrating at that time because he's on the inside.
right.
But this is not. It's not really how it works. It works on two different timelines.
Hmm.
And so, like, he could be reintegrating in the outside world and accessing memories from the inside world at Woes Hollow at the same time, even though they didn't happen
Yeah.
anywhere close to each other.
It's a real trip.
Yeah. But she mentions that those timelines will eventually converge and kind of
Hmm.
everything unspools, right?
Yep. That's it.
So yeah, so then we get to the part of the episode that I explain as everybody goes to dinner. So we had everyone had sex, and now we have everyone goes to dinner.
Which I mean,
Uh,
after you work up an appetite, you got to eat, right? I mean, it's
that's
important.
true. But we get three different dinner scenes, and then a fourth thing that's happening while they're all eating dinner. But we start with Irving, and he goes to Bert and Field's house. And the joke that Bert gives, where he doesn't recognize him,
Hmm.
I thought was like a twist right away. Like, it got me. It totally got me. I thought this was going to be some weird twist that Bert is, like severed on the outside world or something like that. And
Mm.
then, 3 seconds later, it's just a joke.
Instead, he was
Uh,
just wonderful Christopher Walken.
yeah, he was doing his best Christopher Walken
Oh, it was great.
in this episode.
It's
Yeah,
fantastic.
excellent stuff. But yeah, they walk in, and he exclaims that Fields is preparing a cumin glaze, which I hope is a euphemism. I hope that was intentional as well. But then we are introduced to Lord Denethor. Fields is played by John Noble, which about 18 comments told us last week. We don't look up the casting before episodes because we
Yeah.
kind of like to let that unfold, and we get some theories about things that, oh, who's this character going to be and who's this character going to be. And
Yep.
if you look up the casting, then that dispels a lot of those theories, but we try not to do that. But our commenters do. And we appreciate everyone telling us that we were crazy last week with our Fields as the doctor guy theory. But yes, it is just John Noble, Lord Denethor in the flesh. Um, and they start to have dinner. And I was a little bit, disappointed that he was not eating tomatoes at
And
this
not
dinner
just
party.
eating
Like,
them, but just like demolishing them
yeah,
and
come
just
on.
tomato
It's
getting
it's
everywhere.
right there. Like, that is something you could put in the show and like 15 people would be like, "Oh, I see what you did there." It'd be like Leo pointing at the screen. So I was a little disappointed that they didn't add that. But anyways, I digress. But they start to explain more of the backstory behind Bert and why he joined Lumen. And they explain that basically Bert was a son of a bitch on the outside world, and they went to church, and the church's stance is that innies are a different person entirely from outies, so they
Yeah.
have their own soul and can go to heaven even if the outie does not.
Yeah.
And because Fields is some, golden boy, they decide to put Bert in Severance so
Yep.
that he can go to heaven and later rejoin with Fields in the afterlife.
Did any of you expect religion to be part of this in any way?
A little bit. It like Lumen itself kind of feels like a religious cult in some
Sure.
ways. So I'm
Yeah.
actually kind of glad they started to bring this aspect into it.
Yeah.
Uh, I can totally see that being like what founded the company is their own religion kind of thing,
Mhm.
but I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
yeah, I found that super interesting and like clear religious vibes going on with all the stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, like that would be something that I think it was founded in like the 1800s, and that would be kind of along the timeline where like devout Christianity and all that would have
Yeah.
been very prominent.
They also had to be very picky choosy, I guess, because they couldn't say that they were Catholic because gay relationships wouldn't fly, right?
Right.
So
So they
I
were
think they said
Lutheran,
Lutheran.
right?
Yeah. So
Correct. Yeah.
that's interesting too.
Yeah. But at the same time, we are let in on the information that Drummond is going to Irving's house and rummaging through his things. I tried to look at the list of papers that he went through,
Yeah.
and it didn't seem super interesting. I'm sure somebody on the internet will
Yeah.
catch something in there,
Bert's name was on
but
there.
yes, Bert's name was on there. Irving's name was in
Dylan's
there.
name was on there.
Yeah, so
Um,
there were quite a few of the names that we know, but there might have been a few Easter eggs in there that people will catch over the next week.
More
Um,
importantly, Drummond has a tattoo on his hand that says "Frolic."
I think we saw that already. I feel like we
I,
did. I'm pretty
I
sure.
didn't, and it made me laugh because I was just like, this big giant dude with this deep voice has a little
Yes.
teeny tiny frolic tattoo on the inside of his thumb. So good for him.
It's like I wonder if he also has a mom tattoo somewhere. I'd like to think so.
A heart with like the tapestry over it
Yeah.
that says
Yeah,
"mom" in it.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Exactly. But then the other dinner that is going on at the same time, well, one of the other dinners is that Dylan's Audi is having dinner with his wife and kids,
Yep,
and his wife lies to him and
sure
says
does.
that they canceled the meeting. She never saw the innie, which is of course a downright lie because they had a thing.
Yep,
So this is an interesting, dynamic, right? She is, in theory, cheating on the Audi with the innie and
yeah,
covering it up.
yep. And
Uh,
deception is one of the first signs of infidelity.
yeah,
Because
yeah, it's just
the internal shame and embarrassment and not wanting to say what's happening,
yeah,
it only leads to bad things. And I have a feeling that in this particular instance, it will also lead to bad things.
yeah. And what I think is awesome about this is like cheating in
What's
TV is
awesome about
such
cheating
a.
with Shane?
I was gonna say that cheating is such a
Your poor
common.
wife.
No, it's a common trope in television, but they're doing it in such a unique way, right? Like
Yep.
having a love triangle cheating storyline is very common in TV shows, but in this case, it's with the same person. So that is such a cool
And
thing.
what's even more wild is that that's not the first time this season that that's happened.
Correct. Correct.
Because this show is crazy.
Yep. Uh, it's all about thruples, Corey. Milchik said it in the first episode. This whole thing is about thruples. That is the
Yep.
theme of season 2.
Who knew that
Uh,
throwaway line in episode one
yeah.
would be a running theme throughout
Yep.
the season? That's
Yep.
great.
Even Devin wants a thruple with the pregnant woman at the
Yep,
birthing center that she mentions later in the episode.
sure
But
did.
yeah, all thruples. But yeah, so then we get the third dinner, which is Mark just demolishing Chinese food. Which
Gorging.
actually, before this episode aired, people pieced together that because they released a clip of him eating the Chinese food as like
Oh,
a
did they?
promotional
Okay.
clip. But in the trailer, there was a shot of him walking out of that Chinese food place with Helly in the background. And so people pieced it together that Helly would be at that scene. And it's not
Gotcha.
Helly, of course, it's Helena. But this was a really weird scene, and I kind of loved it. because Helena shows up and she's like, I don't know whether or not this was like spying on him intentional. Well, it clearly was intentional, but I don't know if this was like find out what he knows type thing, or if she's like actually kind of falling for Mark in general from
I
this
don't know, man.
experience. Is she going rogue, or is this on behalf of the company?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I
I
think
like
we need to watch and see. I don't think they're
I
gonna
like to
give their
think
hand on
she's
that
going
quite yet.
rogue. I think
Yeah,
that's where this is going a little bit, because she mentions a couple things where it's like, bring you home to dad. It would be the first
yeah,
time, right? So like she's clearly never experienced love, never had the ability to, because of her being wrapped up in this company.
yeah,
So maybe that's the storyline that they're going with Helena, is that she is maybe similar to Milch, kind of questioning the whole structure of her reality.
yeah. Does that make this a quadruple then?
I would think so, right? We've got Helena with Audi Mark, but also Helena with any
Any
Mark, and
mark,
then any Mark with Helly, and
Helly, and it's like a Pokemon evolving. That's what we're getting
yeah,
to at this point.
yeah.
Crazy stuff.
Uh, but yeah, so then Mark storms out like he did from Ragabi, and then of course goes and storms right back to Ragabi.
Hmm.
But he's very paranoid because he thinks he's being followed, because obviously, the stuff that Helena has told him.
Yep.
Um, but then we get a little bit more information about Bert as well, because they're discussing that Bert joined Lumen 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But Irving, being the just like his innie, very
Hmm.
perceptive
Yep.
person, and catches things, right? He caught the night gardener comment, but then
Hmm.
he also catches this comment that Severance has only been around for 12 years,
That's correct.
but Bert has been at Lumen for 20 years.
Yeah.
So Bert is lying about something. And we know Irving catches it. We know the audience catches it. And not only that, but Bert says it again later, like, oh, that was crazy what he was talking about.
Yeah.
Like,
Fields
he's,
slips up from time to time.
yeah,
I have to correct him all the time.
he's very, very guilty.
Yeah.
Which is, I swear to fucking God, Bert. We'll talk about it in a minute. But before we get the finale of the episode, we get this scene of Mark where he does get the chip flooded. By the way, is everyone just walking around with holes, like giant holes in their head? I
Right
guess.
underneath their skin, apparently.
Yeah. Oh my God. That scene. I'm not a gore guy, so like
Oh
even that
man.
scene was like,
Yeah.
no, don't want to watch that. But yeah, so they flood
Fun.
the chip. He starts having these crazy reintegrations, and then he goes uh, upstairs because Devin knocks on his door, which I
Yeah.
thought that was going to be Helena, actually,
So did
not
I.
Devin.
Yeah. Me too.
Uh, and maybe Mark thought that too. But then, like I said, Devin explains that she has the hots for that pregnant woman, the surrogate woman.
Mm.
Um, well, kind of. Is it like an any surrogate Audi real person, like
Who
something like that
knows at this
dynamic?
point?
Anyways, but then Mark, I think, has a stroke, because he mentions that he's smelling something
Mhm.
and then like can't move his hand, which is like,
Yeah.
if you see anyone doing that in real life, like they're having a stroke, get them to the
Yeah.
emergency
And
room.
and all that was in front of him was a glass of water, which doesn't really have a smell. So he was
Yeah.
obviously cooking that up in his own
Yeah,
head.
it
So
was that, or some sort of reintegration thing where he's smelling something in the any world.
yeah, which I'm
But
sure was accelerated because Ragabi says to him, "You can't move your head," and
mhm.
then he proceeds to run up a flight of stairs and walk
And
around
then get a
the mandible and
concussion
stuff. Yeah.
basically from
So
landing on the floor.
this can
So that
only
can't
go
be
well.
good for, yeah, this can't be good for Mark. Not great for Mark.
Yeah.
But yet then we get the ending, which we alluded to in the very beginning of this review, where Bert says goodbye to Irving, and Bert gives him that stare,
Hmm.
which, given all the information we've seen up until this moment, makes me think Bert is a rat.
Could be. There's a
He
good chance.
is still working for Lumen, and he's trying to get information about Irving. He lured him to his house so that Drummond could go to Irving's house and rummage through all of his stuff.
So here's my next question for you: if Bert is indeed a rat, was he even severed, or was he just down there doing observations and whatnot?
That's interesting too, right?
Because Helena was able to get down there
It's true.
with no problem, right? So in theory, Bert could have just been his normal self the whole time.
So he was on the list of severed employees, so that's something. Like we saw it on that list, but
Yeah,
maybe that could have been faked.
could be a good cover up on Lumen's behalf, right?
Yeah, man, I don't know. I what I'm kind of interested in too is like who is Fields, right?
He's
Like
Denethor.
if yes. Maybe we were right. Maybe he was the doctor and he was just played by somebody different in the export hall scene.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, super super great twist for me because we kind of had these antagonists already and
Hmm.
now I think we have a new one.
Hmm.
And I think that is an excellent thing for the TV show to do is turn it on its head that
Of
maybe
course.
this is the big bad. You think Helena's the big bad the whole
Hmm.
time, but she's gonna devolve into a good guy, and
Yeah.
you think Milchek is the big bad, and he does the same thing.
Right.
Uh, Cobell is already showing signs of that too, so we
And
need the antagonist.
where the hell is she?
Yeah, we haven't seen Cobell in a
A
while.
couple episodes now. So
Yeah, I mean, she did run away. That was the last thing that we saw. But she
it's
got
very
back in her car and
interesting.
ran away.
Yeah.
It might be a situation where she shows up in the last second to save the day.
Well, hey, at the end of the day, that little promo that they showed with Helly taking her heels off, at least for now, does not mean that she's pregnant, which was
Thank
about to
God.
make you have a conniption. So
I was gonna go on a 3 minute rant if that was the case. I mean, I always like to give writers the benefit of the doubt. If they did go down that road, like that was a big theory on the internet this week, is that Helly was pregnant after the sex. Uh, had they gone down that route, I would not have liked the direction. But at the same time, this show has been very good at, even when it does tropey stuff, flipping it on its head.
sure.
So maybe we still get that at some point. I hope we don't. I
Well,
hope the show is smarter than that. But
the
even if we
likelihood is
do,
getting higher though, because
that's
now
true.
those two bodies have had
That's
sex
true.
twice,
That is
right?
true.
And
You're
then here's a one that they could do at some point. Any Dylan could hook up with his wife, and then she could get pregnant, and then he could say, "Wait a minute, no, you can't because we haven't had sex in a while." And then she could be like, "No, do the DNA test," and then the DNA test will say that it's Dylan because it's the same body. And now I've gone cross-eyed.
it is thruple babies
Thruple.
is the actual
Oh my
thing.
god! Like just like Muppet Babies, Thruple Babies. It could be a kid's cartoon. Wow. What an episode, huh, man?
Yeah,
God.
I was fully in on this episode because it just took so many things that we knew and flipped it on its head,
Yeah.
right? Like Bert being the bad guy was not something that I saw coming, even
No.
though when we really look back on it, like casting Christopher Walken in that role, we probably should have seen that coming, but he was just so
Yeah.
sweet and mild mannered in the first season.
Yeah, but casting someone like him in a throwaway type role doesn't really make any sense. So we
Yeah,
probably shouldn't have seen that coming.
yeah,
But man, it feels like the show just kind of can't do anything wrong at this point.
that's true. I mean, they were what 6 episodes in, and every episode to me has been just an absolute banger.
Yep. And we got the news this week that it's the most watched show on the streamer's history.
Yep.
It beat out Ted Lasso, which is cool. So clearly there's an appetite and an audience for it, and they're working on season 3, which is awesome. So, any other thoughts on this one before we wrap things up?
I'm sure there will be plenty of comments with lots of thoughts. So we'll just we'll continue the discussion there.
Yeah, let's continue that discussion in the comments section below. Go ahead and drop your theories in, what you thought about this episode, where you think it's going, and if you're feeling how we feel, drop a Bert, I swear to fucking God in the comments, and we'll respond to every single one of those that comes through. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We'll be back with some more videos next week, and of course we'll be back a week from today to cover the 7th episode of season 2 of Severance. So until next time, we'll see you guys in the next video.